Hey everybody, Travis Watkins here, talking about the employee retention tax credit. Taking your questions. If you have questions, please type them in, and we will get those answered for you. But we're talking about the employee retention tax credit. That's the credit that the IRS is allowing here for businesses that kept their doors open and their employees paid during the pandemic and beyond. What we're talking about is 2021 and 2020. What this thing will do if you qualify is that it will amount to up to $26,000 per employee. For keeping them employed during the pandemic and beyond. So a lot of questions that have been coming in from employers lately, and maybe you have the same question. There are 3 ways to qualify, and they're done by quarter. And the traditional one is a full or partial government shutdown. If you had one of those in the years 2020 or 2021, those are automatic shoe-ins for the ERC. So you're going to have to show some type of governmental order, either state, local, municipal will work, federal orders. A lot of these come down to the mayor of a city has at one time put something in place, shutting down a business or having certain requirements that squeeze down businesses to a point where they're losing money. So that's the first most traditional way of getting into a qualified ERC quarter. The second way is through a revenue decline, and there's 2 different rules for this depending on which year you're looking at. If you're looking at 2020 quarters, you compare that same quarter to 2019, and you've got to find a 50% decline per quarter. If you're looking at 2021, it's the same analysis, except it's only a 20% decline in business. And then there's the third type of qualification for a quarter for ERC, and that's the one where a lot of people are having questions. The law changed on this back in 2021, and that's where a lot of folks that had looked at this in the past either thought they didn't qualify before the change, or they may have thought that since they got PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, for some part of a quarter or multiple quarters, then they didn't qualify, and so they haven't looked at it again. But this one is a more of a catch-all type of approach to the ERC, and it's come about because there's still so much money left up in the ERC coffers, so to speak, that that the government has opened this up with this new way to get in the ERC door, and that is through supply chain disruption. That's what they call it. So the question is, what is supply chain disruption? And the answer is, good lawyer answer is, it depends, and it's going to be different really for everybody, even employers in the same type of industry. It's certainly not a one size fits all necessarily requirement. It is something that you may have to provide some evidence on later on down the road, but let's talk about it. What you're looking at mostly here is some type of a disruption to the number. The magic number here is 10% or more of your business. So a lot of people thought that they didn't qualify for ERC because they didn't qualify for those first 2 types of requirements. They weren't shut down necessarily the whole 2 years or many, many months like some actual industries were, gyms and salons and things like that. But the cool thing about the supply chain disruption is you could be open and you could have actually not had a decline in revenue. You might have actually had an increase in revenue, but supply chain disruption to 10% or more of some part of your business was affected, and that gets you into the ERC as well. And here's some classic examples. I guess I could talk just about my business for one thing. We do tax resolution work at my place, and we also have some accounting and bookkeeping, tax preparation type services. And as you may recall, or maybe you didn't, the IRS was shut down for quite a few months. And during that time, obviously there was not very much work that could go on. There was not a whole lot of questions that could be answered by the IRS. They were not punching out a lot of return processing or assessments. And a lot of what we do is tied to getting those tax returns filed and assessed so that we can work something out in the way of offering compromise or different types of installment agreements. And when the IRS is completely closed, obviously that creates an issue for us. So we weren't necessarily closed during some of those months, but the IRS was. Then when the IRS reopened, they had still, and even to the present day, as you may have heard, the IRS still has problems getting tax returns processed and assessed. So once they opened, they were still squeezing down on not being able to get a whole lot of work done. And that creates a disruption in our supply chain. It definitely impacts 10% or more. Another example, we have some law firms that, let's say they did litigation work, and they were shut down effectively because the courthouse was shut down or not allowing in-person depositions, for instance, during that period of time. And no court, no depositions, no work, no clients, no billables, or, even flat fee type of work for those types of attorneys. Now, the interesting part in this equation is, let's talk about a large law firm that has, say, 100 employees. Let's say it has litigation department, but it also has other types of departments, transactional departments, wills and estates, drafting of trusts and things like that. If you may need to show at some point that the litigation department, is more than 10% of the business that was coming in. So while other parts of the firm were doing okay, the litigation part was not kicking on all cylinders because of the shutdowns in that supply chain, so to speak. And then, of course, there are just your traditional types of supply chain disruptions. There are car dealers are a big one. They employ workers, and they were unable, because of governmental shutdowns or supply chain issues as they related to imports. They could not get inventory in to sell. So that's affecting 10% or more of their business, and so they're suffering there from a supply chain disruption, and therefore any of those months that would qualify for that automatically would then qualify for the ERC based on that third type of hurdle. All right. If you have other questions about this, you can reach out to us directly. There's there's some phone numbers here below me, as well as links to our website, which have some applications, and you can also sign up for a free 15-minute consultation. And in that period of time, we should be able to get enough of an understanding and documentation that we would need and able to make a assessment of what quarters might be available for ERC for you and what types of credit amounts you might be looking at when those come back. All right. If you have other questions, feel free to ask those there in the comments. Otherwise, and we'll get back with you. Otherwise, we'll sign off here and see you again with more of your questions in about a week.